Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Friends of Gaming by Winter Moon Games. My name is Chris, and with this final episode of the Friends of Gaming season, I'm excited to have my guest, the creator and founder, I guess, of Things Get Dicey, Paula Deming.
Hi, I'm Paula. I'm the season finale. Is that what? That's pretty. That made me feel
Yeah,
very
it's just the
important.
way it's just kind of the way it worked out, and I'm glad that you're the person that gets to have that badge of honor now. So,
Yes. Oh, it makes me feel like the
welcome.
thing everyone's been waiting for, and I'm gonna, whether that's true or not, because it probably isn't. I'm gonna carry that with me to combat imposter syndrome.
Please do. I would be honored to have you do that. So, welcome to the
Thank
show,
you.
and we're going to talk a little bit and get to know you a little bit today.
Yeah.
So, why don't you first just start off by telling us a little bit about you personally, maybe where you're
Mhm.
from, how you got involved, to maybe the 90-second version of how you got to where you are today, and we'll kind of break that apart as we
Okay.
go and see where it leads.
Well, my name's Paula. I am an actress and I grew up in North Carolina. And then about 10 years ago, I moved out to Los Angeles and I've been just chipping away at my acting career out here. And in the process, got pretty heavily into the board game hobby and thought, why don't I combine the two things that I love? Acting and specifically sketch comedy and board games. And I did that. And that's how Things Get Dicey came about, which, if you're not familiar with it, it is a sketch comedy series about board games that you can find on YouTube. If you type in Things Get Dicey.
So, I've actually been watching your content for a while, and I one of the things that jumps out at
Mhm.
me, and I don't know if this is intentional or not, and I wanted to
Let's
ask you
find
if it
out.
is. One of the yeah, I know, right? Um, your content is very relatable, right? You don't very much deal with reviews or previews or Kickstarter content. You're more talking about the experience as a board
Mhm.
gamer at a tabletop game night or whatever. So, is that something that you set out to do, like to be relatable?
Yeah, well, I definitely specifically set out to not do reviews. So I don't do that. And sometimes I get contacted by people about like wanting a review of their game. And I have to say, hey, I don't do reviews. And very specifically, when I was thinking of wanting to make videos about board games, I very quickly knew that I didn't want to make reviews because I felt like there's already a ton of people doing that, and I didn't feel like I had anything to add to that dialogue, and I don't have a journalism background or a criticism background, and a lot of people who do board game reviews don't, but for me, that felt important. And because I didn't have that background, I thought, "Well, I don't know. Why would anyone care what I think about this game?" But what I can do is tell jokes about games, and I do want them to be relatable because I think it's important as gamers to have um like a sense of community, I think we all want that. We all want to feel connected to other people who like the things that we like, and I think one way to build the feeling of community is to have jokes, like almost like inside jokes, like not anything I don't want to be a gatekeeper, but I want us to feel like I want someone who plays games to look at my videos and be like, oh, I get that because I play games too. And I want us to all feel like connected and kind of special that way. So yeah, I think that is intentional, and in some ways wanting to also be relatable in a broader sense as well. Like I have a video about analysis paralysis. It's the first one I made. And that is relatable to gamers, but also like, my family who maybe doesn't play games can look at it and be like, oh, yeah, well, I also have a hard time making a decision about what flavor of ice cream to order or whatever. And so, in a sense, sometimes I am also looking to be relatable in a broader sense as well, but using the specifics of games.
I love the analysis paralysis one. In fact, one of my friends that I play video games with almost every night, I nicknamed him Workbench because every time he finds a workbench in the game to upgrade his gear, he's there for like what feels like forever, upgrading his gear. So it's not just limited to board games. You're right. Even picking your own ice cream. So yeah, that's
That's so
awesome.
funny. In video
What are
games, this is not what we're talking about, but I'm so the
no?
opposite of that. I'm like, you want me to upgrade my stuff? I don't want to spend time crafting. I just want to play. And so I always end up with like kind of whatever junk loot I just found because I don't want to spend the time making something
I hear
specific.
you. I think I fall somewhere in between. I'm the same way with character creation. I'm just like, he's got eyes, nose, and a mouth. I'm good to go.
I will spend time on character creation, though. I feel like that's a very girl
Okay,
thing
fair.
to do, though. Not to gender everything, but be like, now I'm going to dress them up like this. I'm going to make their hair like this. And then I'm going to, yeah.
No, that's hilarious, and I'm glad we share that together. So, what are some you mentioned sketch comedy? So I'm curious, like growing up, what were some of your inspirations? Maybe led to you, being where you are today. What influences you with your writing and your comedy?
That's a great question. It's interesting because growing up, I actually didn't think I could do comedy. Um, I mean, I've been acting and I've been interested in acting for a really, really long time. And I, took classes as a kid and did stuff as a kid. And obviously, I was in like the High School Musical and all of that. And then in college, got much more into it. And I definitely wasn't looking at comedy and thinking, oh, that's a thing I can be doing and should be doing. And it wasn't really actually until I moved to LA and booked my first play out here. And it was a very silly, like campy comedy. And when I went, oh, wait, maybe I can be funny. Maybe I am funny. And then I got into improv and I started doing more of that. And now that's most of what I do is comedy. So it's just kind of interesting how that grew. But the things that I would say inspire me now or my influences now, sketch comedy specifically, I would say Key and Peele are big sketch comedy influences for me.
Love Key and Peele.
Yeah. Actually, it wasn't that long ago that I was feeling really blocked when it came to coming up with ideas for Things Get Dicey. Or I had an idea, but I wasn't sure how to write the script. And I was just staring at this blank page for like an hour. And I just went to YouTube and I just watched a bunch of Key and Peele sketches just to get just to feel like inspired by their style. And then went back and was able to start writing again. But I also love like Community is one of my favorite sitcoms. I like that style of like a single cam sitcom. It tends to be a little more grounded than what we would call like a multicam, which is typically done in front of a live audience, and something more like The Big Bang Theory is a multicam comedy. So yeah, Community is a big influence for me in kind of my style of comedy. And then other things, like The Office, Parks and Rec, Brooklyn Nine-Nine, that kind of almost mockumentary style, I like a lot as well in the kinds of jokes that I'm interested in telling or the style of humor I'm going for.
Well, it's very funny, and if anybody who's here watching hasn't had a chance to check out Things Get Dicey yet, please do. You just had a new video release based on those old 90s horrible infomercials or whatever you want to call them that we used to watch. Yeah. Now, was that something that you've had an idea for a while, or is that something that you just maybe saw something that was like, I want to do that now?
I love doing parody. It's one of my favorite things. I love doing a good parody. Well, good is maybe subjective, but I love parody. And I have to tell you that these old commercials that I remember as a kid, Sally Struthers was in them, and they were for ICS, which is like international communication. I can't even remember now, international communication schools or whatever. And that is actually what I used as the inspiration for this. And there's something about those commercials that I used to see as a kid that really like stuck in my brain. And so I have done different versions of a parody of that specific Sally Struthers commercial in a lot of different contexts. It's like I reference it a lot. It just makes me laugh. And so when I had the opportunity to do it for a game, I just like leaped at the chance. I was like, oh wait, we should do something where we like those old commercials where you list a bunch of courses. And I was like, oh, I can do my Sally Struthers. And we'll do it for a board game episode.
I love it. That's great. And so you do, I'm curious, just as a, because I mentioned to you before the show that I also do videography and editing. And I know, I mean, a lot of people, one of the biggest misconceptions, people don't understand how much work goes into this.
Don't.
They don't. And it's not really their fault. Once they start doing it, I work with volunteers and people like that learn how to edit, and they're like, oh my gosh, I can't handle this, right? But before that, they're just like, hey, can you edit this 10-minute piece like by today?
Yeah, no, absolutely. That's going to take me like A week? Like,
Yeah, it takes a while. So I'm curious about, from soups to nuts on an average, things get dicey
mhm.
episode from writing, conceptualizing, whatever you all do. How long does that process take for you on a
Oh,
given day?
yeah. A while. Probably a lot longer than people think. We spend I spend it probably combined at least one full day writing a single sketch. And that's often spread out over time, or I get multiple ideas, so I'm working on multiple scripts at once. But if I really think about if I were to take all that spread out time and combine it into one chunk, it's probably a full day. So I'm talking 8 to 10 hours of working on the script for one sketch that's probably 3 pages long. And that's from getting the idea, writing it down, brainstorming with some friends who I trust, doing revisions of the script, figuring out what's working, what isn't working. That's a full day. Then we typically spend a full day, and again, by full day, I mean 8 to 10 hours, um, shooting a sketch. Uh, and then in post, I'm probably spending a good 40-hour week doing all of the edits, going through all the footage, doing any kind of color correction or visual effects or graphics that we need to do, and then rendering it out and then uploading. It's usually like midnight the night before a sketch is supposed to come out, and I'm finally getting it uploaded to YouTube. And I'm like, oh, wait, I haven't done the captions yet. And I need to type out all the captions. And so it's a good, if we're lucky, I have 2 weeks in between episodes, and I am working basically the whole 2 weeks trying to get it to come together.
I always seem to forget the YouTube thumbnail, and I'm like,
Yeah.
oh crap, last last minute trying to make a
Like,
thumbnail for
what
YouTube.
is the image I should pull from it? And the hardest part actually for me is usually coming up with what to call it. Because I have a title for every sketch when we're working on it, but it's not usually the title that actually gets put on the video. And it's about the time that I'm making the thumbnail that I'm like, wait, what should we actually call this though? What's a good title that's funny but short, but will get people to click on it, but sort of tells them what it is, but doesn't give away the joke?
No, I think that you've got a really great concept, and I think I for one as a content creator will see your videos and like, oh, why didn't I think of that? Right? Do you run into people that say that to you a lot? Like, wow, that was really clever, and I wish I thought of that idea, or like, what kind of
Sometimes,
feedback do you get?
I sometimes get that from people, and then I usually say like, or people be like, "Oh, I had that idea, and you just kind of beat me to it." And I'm like, "Well, you can still do it. Like the way we would approach it would be different. We're different people, so the way we would think about a joke, even if it's a joke about the same topic, would be different. So I would say like, just do it. Why not? Just because I'm doing it doesn't mean that you can't be doing it."
Exactly. And that's really great feedback because I think people will see that and they'll be like, oh, well, somebody's doing it, so I'm not going to bother. But like you said, everybody brings their own kind of spin to it. And that's one of the reasons I got into reviewing games because why not?
Mhm.
You don't know what people want to watch.
Mhm.
So, yeah, no, I'm glad that you have been so successful with this. Now, I guess the big question I have is, are you full time with all of this stuff? Because you've mentioned these long days. So, do you also have a day job that you're juggling?
I don't have a day job anymore. Actually, at the start of this year, I left my day job because I was starting to get more opportunities to create more content. And I knew that I could not balance that with the day job I had before, which I was already working part time hours at in order to have time to work on Things Get Dicey, but also to be pursuing my acting career. So I have a kind of a bunch of different things I cobbled together now to create my full time thing. So I'm closer to Things Get Dicey being full time.
You're on the trajectory hopefully to be a full-time content creator, and that's awesome. I think a lot of people watching this, I try to hopefully have guests that will encourage people to just start making content because you got to start
Oh, yeah.
somewhere.
You'll learn things as you do it. And even if no one watches, I've done a lot of internet content. Things Get Dicey is not the first thing I've made. It's just the first thing that saw any success. And there's something that I learned from each previous project. If you look on the internet or if you dig into my YouTube channel deep enough, you'll see like, oh, 5 years ago, I was doing this web series that got 150 views on every episode or whatever. Like basically, no one's watching it, but I learned from it. I learned so much from it. And then the next thing I learned a little bit more, and the next thing I learned a little bit more. And then we got to things get dicey and all those things came together and this just happened to hit in a way. So I would say, yeah, if you don't start now, you don't know what you'll be able to make later. Yeah.
And your first video is probably gonna suck.
Yeah, I mean,
Like that's just the reality of it. Like you got to start
mhm.
somewhere. So speaking of that, it's a good segue actually. I'm curious if you've had what kind of other experiences you've had acting. I took a quick peek at your IMDb page
Mhm.
and curious if you want to share a little bit about maybe some other experiences
Yeah.
you've had off the comedy scene or whatever you've experienced there.
Yeah, so I've done a lot of theater, especially back when I was in North Carolina. I did a lot of theater before I moved out here, and then I've done some theater here, which I love. I have done, musicals. I've done dramas. I've done Shakespeare and Commedia dell'arte. Classic theater, and I've done a lot of things. I love theater. Um, and then in terms of my like more professional credits, I've managed to book two, three TV jobs. One, well, I was only sort of count the third because it was on a reality show that does like reenactments. So I got to reenact someone who got a tattoo.
What was that?
Do you know that show Tattoo Nightmares?
I've heard of it. Yeah, were you like one of the
Yeah.
dramatization people?
So, because in that show, someone has like a tattoo, a real person has a tattoo they don't want. And then they go in and they tell the story of this tattoo they don't want. And the way that show does or did, I don't know if it still airs, they would do these kind of silly reenactments of the story. And so I was a person who got a tattoo that they didn't want in this reenactment. So only sort of count that. But it paid me. It was non-union, but it did pay.
That's great.
It did air on television. But then I got to be the first TV show I booked was one of those multicam comedies that taped in front of a live studio audience. It's a TBS show that doesn't exist anymore, called Ground Floor, which was very cool. And then I booked also, I've had a very small part on Grey's Anatomy, very small. And then otherwise, it's just
Was
auditioning and waiting for the next things that will come up outside of, other kind of more independent content, like web content or, people's short films or things like that.
I'm assuming you moved to LA like maybe not with the I guess the promise of having success, right? Or
Sure.
did you have some jobs lined up that made you go out there and
Nope.
take the leap of faith?
No, yeah. I just knew that if I didn't come out to LA and try to see if I could make an acting career, that I would always wonder. And I did not want to be a person. I looked around me where I was and I saw a lot of people who were older than me and bitter because they felt stuck and that they had never tried. And I did not want to be that. So I thought, you know what? I will just go. I don't have to stay there forever. I think people sometimes get in their head that whatever choice they make is the choice they have to always live with forever. But I was like, well, I can go to Los Angeles. And if I hate it in a year, I can go literally anywhere else. Like, this doesn't have to be the rest of my life. And that really freed me from analysis paralysis when it came to deciding what to do. And I came out to LA to see what would happen. And certainly more has happened in my acting career here than would have happened if I stayed home, if I stayed back in North Carolina. And it turns out that it's not an easy place to live, but I love it here. So I'm probably here, been here 10 years. I don't think I'm going anywhere.
If you can, if you're willing to, I'm wondering if you'd be willing to offer us maybe talk about some of those sacrifices you
Sure.
had to make moving, because I think that's one of the things that holds people like me or others back
Mhm.
from. We grow up in an area,
Mhm.
we want to be near our family. Our parents make us think,
Mhm.
don't ever leave, right? But moving to California, that's no joke, right?
Yeah.
You're going
I
a different
moved
time zone, and
like legit across the country. Like, yeah, I went from North Carolina to California. There, it's very, very different. Yeah, well, I was lucky in that I knew like one person out here when I moved out here. And so I was able to stay on their couch for a couple weeks until I found a room to rent. I think the main thing was a big sacrifice I made was before I moved out here. I lived home. I lived at home with my parents for like 2.5 years, so that I could save money. to move to California. And so that was kind of a sacrifice at the time because I was in my early 20s and I was very anxious to be feeling like I was a grown up, an independent person who could provide for themselves. And I needed to kind of set that aside and still like live in my parents' house so that I could get to the point where I could be an independent person. And so I did that so that I could save up money so that when I came out to LA, I didn't have to worry immediately about getting a survival job. I could focus on trying to just spend my time trying to find auditions, trying to get meetings with agents, and figuring those things out. Um, and in LA specifically, you kind of have to change your idea of what your standard of living is because everything here is much more expensive. Um, it just is. It's much more expensive. And so things that back in North Carolina wouldn't be like a nice neighborhood of an area I'd want to be in. Now I'm like, oh yeah, this is like a legit decent part of town, like I had to kind of change how I thought about things. Um, and have roommates when people in other places might be 30 and can live on their own. Well, that's not the case in a place like LA or in an area where people are working very freelance, job to job, paycheck to paycheck, trying to make a dream happen. Sometimes that means you don't live on your own, you have a roommate, or you figure out all the bus routes instead of having a car, or though that is difficult to do in LA. It's difficult to not have a car in LA. um, and then the sacrifice too of having to, on a kind of an emotional front, um, put myself out there in a way that is very vulnerable, especially as a performer or an artist or a creative. You put so much of your personal self in what you're doing. And this is actually true for things get dicey as well. There's a certain amount of vulnerability and being like, I made this thing and it's from me, or I'm a performer. I'm me. The product I'm presenting you is me. And then putting it in front of people and being like, do you like it? Do you want to hire it? Do you want to watch the video? And when people are like, ooh, no, I don't though. And you're like, oh, okay. And it's hard to not take that personally. So I think that's kind of a different kind of sacrifice in being willing to be vulnerable and potentially feel kind of hurt because of it and having to learn how to separate yourself from that a little, if that makes sense.
It does make sense. I always have a huge amount of respect for people that, uh, even though those sacrifices present themselves as being somewhat daunting, and maybe even, you're gonna. I was gonna actually ask you. I'll ask you in a second when I finish my thought. I tend to do that, but I have so much respect for people that just say, you know what, I'm gonna go for it. And yeah, I might fail, and yeah, I might have to live on a couch for a month, but I'm gonna try. Did you get any pushback from
Mm.
parents or friends that were like, "You have no plan. Why are you gonna do this? This is not a good idea."
Um, I am very lucky in that my parents didn't give me pushback. I think they made their own sacrifice in trusting me and the decision I was making. And I think part of that is because they saw the sacrifices I was already making. I was living at home and working, and that was like all I was doing. And they could see the money I was setting aside. They could see the preparations I was making to be prepared to come out here. I did a lot of prep work before I came out. I took a bunch of classes. I talked to a lot of people who had already been in LA. I researched agencies. I researched classes out here. I researched things so that when I came, I could hit the ground running and have a game plan. And I think my parents were able to see that. And if they I don't know how much fear they felt about me moving out here, but I'm lucky they hid it well. um, but I did get pushback from other people I knew, especially, I was talking about those people who were kind of the reason I wanted to leave, who were bitter. And a lot of people who had come out, failed, and then after 3 months, I knew a lot of people who'd moved to LA and after 3 months left because they hadn't prepared themselves. And so I would tell people like, "Oh, I'm getting ready to move out to Los Angeles." And people would go, "Oh." Especially like people in the acting community where I was from, they'd go, "Okay. Oh." see you in 3 months. And I'd be like, no, I'm not. Just because you failed at it doesn't mean that I'm going to fail at it. Like, I'm committed. I'm going to stay there a year. And if after a year I hate it, I'll leave, but I'm going to stick it out for a year. So I did get kind of some patronizing pushback from other people who honestly had tried and given up.
Yeah, and that's I think that that's having a goal where if it doesn't work out in a year, you're gonna go back is huge and probably really helped you mentally to just prepare for whatever was to come your way. I wanted to talk a little bit about some failure. You
Mhm.
touched a little bit on being rejected and
Mhm.
people not wanting to look at all of your content and having a lot of videos that just didn't
Mhm.
quite make it. How did that failure help push you
Mhm.
forward? Or were there ever any points where you did think, I'm not going to make it a year, I'm just going to give
Mhm.
up?
I knew I was going to make it a year. That was never a question for me. But that's also I can be very stubborn, and so I knew like, well, I decided I would do this for a year, and I also, like I said, I had planned before I came out, so I knew that I could if I lived incredibly frugally, and I mean like spending almost nothing. That I could live off of what I had saved for a year. It wasn't going to be a fancy life. It wasn't going to be a life with much more in it than, like some tortillas and cheese, in a microwave for lunch every day. Um, but I was like, I can survive this for a year. And so that not doing that for me didn't feel like an option. But other forms of failure have been difficult, and sometimes I do even now, especially now, I'm seeing success in some areas, but in other areas I'm not, and it can be difficult to watch, especially other people see success. Someone else booked that show that you auditioned for, or someone else booked that show that you really wanted to get the audition for and you didn't. um that can be hard, and you either let that make you feel like giving up, or you go, okay, well, what can I learn from this? How can I make myself more of an appealing choice than I was? How can I just put myself out there so people even know I exist, so that they'll want me to audition? Should I be taking an examination of myself? Should I be in a different class? Should I be taking more classes? Should I be, reaching out to this person or setting up a meeting with that person?
I'm resonating with everything you're saying, and there's a reason I asked
Hmm.
this question to you because I think the struggle for the content creation world for gaming is so
Yeah.
oversaturated with people just creating content,
Hmm.
and I think the struggle for people that are small is getting 40 views on your video that you
Yeah.
spent 14 hours on,
Hmm.
and struggling with that, like struggling. So I appreciate you sharing that because it's always encouraging to just be reminded that you don't want to focus so much on the views. Just keep creating the content, keep doing it. At least I do that
Hmm.
now for something that I'm passionate about,
Hmm.
not just because I want to, I was chasing views and followers for a long time and it didn't really help
Yeah.
me with my sanity any more than it does now.
Mhm.
So no, thank you for sharing that, and it's it's important I think to hear that from others who have had
Yeah.
success in the industry, talk about those real struggles.
Well,
So
my friends, Nick and Mike, actually, Nick and Mike Murphy, if you're familiar with them, they have the channel The Brothers Murph. We like I'm name. I realized like that sounds like a name drop. I didn't mean it that way. I have talked about this actually with some friends of mine, and we talk a lot about how the thing that you often put the most work in or are the most excited about is the thing that like people just won't watch for some reason. It just won't do as well. And then the thing that you're like, whatever, I just like knocked this out because I needed to get a video out, and like meh, that's the thing that will blow up. And it's like, what? Ugh. And, yeah, I mean, it's just true across all levels of content creation, I think. No matter how many subscribers you end up having. And actually, this is a thing I do a lot. I will look up really successful YouTube channels, and they're not typically gaming channels, the ones who are it's like it's their YouTubers. They have millions of followers. They put out like vlogs every day, and I'll just look at their views on their videos. And I am encouraged to see that even the biggest channels will put out a video, and that video might do 100,000 views. It does really well, or whatever, maybe a million views. And then 4 videos down the road, you're like, well, this only got 1,000 views. And I know for some people, they'd be like, wow, 1,000 views, that would be amazing. But if you're looking at a huge channel that has like 2 million followers, that's a huge disparity in view count. So even the biggest channels, the people who are legit making a living off of doing this, Not everything does as well as everything else. Some things hit and some things just don't, and it's true for everyone. And reminding myself of that makes me feel less pressure to have every video do as well as my best performing video. So I would say if everyone should kind of carry that with them as well a little bit.
That's great insight, and I really appreciate you opening up a little bit more about your experiences, because I think that goes a long way for people to hear it from, someone that they admire and look up to. Which I think if you've got some success, then you're gonna have people that want to be like you and maybe try the next video, and so thank you for opening up about that. What would you say? I don't want to put you on the spot, but maybe in the final moments that we have. How would you, I know this is kind of a pressure question, I suppose, but how would you personally encourage someone that is considering taking that leap that you made? Like, they're living in some small town in Missouri and they want to go to California, but maybe they are worried what their parents will think, or how, I know every situation is going to be different, but in a nutshell, or in just like one glance, how would you encourage someone to maybe think about that direction?
Yeah. Well, I think I'd start by asking some potentially difficult questions. One, can you imagine, like, people used to say this to me all the time, and I used to be like, meh, whatever, but it is so true. Can you imagine yourself doing anything else and being happy? If the answer is yes, probably do that other thing because creative work, artist work can wear you down. But if the answer is no, and for me, the answer is no. If I am not acting, if I'm not performing, if I'm not creating, I am unhappy. It is a pattern I have seen in myself over and over and over again. I tried to do other things and I was like, I'm unhappy. I need to be acting. I need to be expressing myself artistically in whatever form I find. Maybe that means community theater. Maybe that means auditioning for TV shows. Maybe that means being in commercials. Maybe that means, figuring out how to do voiceover work. Maybe that means making YouTube videos. However it is for you, that's the thing you need to be doing. So if the answer is, I am not happy if I'm not doing this thing and I want to try doing it in a bigger market like Los Angeles, then great, do it. But no, it's not going to be easy. And that's why it's like we have to start with some difficult conversations first. It won't be easy, and you need to be prepared for that. Because if you think you're just going to magically get discovered and make it, you're going to get discouraged very quickly. So know that it won't be easy. Know that you need to do some research. You need to save up some money. You do. You need to save up money so that you feel safe once you get to where you're going. You need a little cushion in case things don't work right away. But once you have all of those things set, you're ready. And you can go in with like a realistic expectations, and then you're able to see all the positives. Like, you're able to be like, oh, I can take improv classes and find this community of people who do improv. And now I have friends who understand me, and I'm getting on stage at these indie shows and I'm performing and I'm expressing myself. And that's amazing. Or you find the neighborhood. And a lot of people think of Los Angeles specifically as like just Beverly Hills or just Rodeo Drive, or these like vapid, shallow people, because that's kind of what you see presented in the media. But the coolest thing to me about Los Angeles is there's such a diversity in the city. There's so many different neighborhoods, and each neighborhood feels like its own personality. I truly believe anyone can find where they fit here. So okay, once you get here, now go see all the neighborhoods. Find the place that feels like home for you, and then spend your time there. This is really more advice than, I guess, encouragement.
That's okay. Yeah.
But do it. Like, if you really want to do it, don't let anyone talk you out of it. Just prepare yourself and then try it. Give yourself a deadline, and also know that if you end up not liking it, because maybe you won't like it, there is no shame in doing something else. There was no shame in going, oh, I tried this. It didn't work. I don't want this anymore. I'm going to do this instead. I'm going to change the job I'm trying to do. I'm going to teach. I'm going to write. I'm going to work at Starbucks because I like it. I'm going to go into accounting. I have a friend of mine who's like, I decided I wanted to be an electrician and is about to finish his schooling for that. Like, great. Or move somewhere else, or move back home, save up some more money, come back and try again. There's no shame in taking it in small steps and figuring out what you want and changing your mind.
Your question that you proposed to us of, if there's something else you can do and be happy, do it. I think that was really profound. And for me, the answer is no too. Like, gaming making games, talking about games, that's what I'm doing. That's what I want to do. Nothing else makes me, I can't talk about or think about anything else 24 hours a day except that, and so thank you for sharing that. That was great advice.
If I might too, in a thing that's a little more specific to making like YouTube videos, if you are happy with what you're making and you are putting yourself into it, I really believe, like, don't try to be someone else. Don't try to be Tom Vassell in front of his game shelf reviewing a game. Be you. Talk about games the way you want to talk about games, because that's what's going to make you stand out. I truly believe if I had just tried to do review videos, my channel would not be where it is now. I made stuff that was me. And so I would encourage you to make stuff that feels like you. Then you'll also enjoy it more. It's still going to feel like work sometimes, but it'll feel less like work. And then like you're like, well, I like the videos and the 300 people who are watching them also like them. And that's enough for me. If you have a dedicated small audience, amazing. You'll probably honestly have a better community that way too, because you have less chance of like random jerks coming up into your comments and saying things that you're like, this is not nice. I'm a real person. I have feelings. I read these comments.
I mean, authentic community is what we're all pursuing, hopefully, right? Like that genuine community, not just like, hey, I'm doing a giveaway, now come like my page, right? You want people who are going to be engaging with your content. So, well, in the last maybe minute or so, why don't you give us some quick ways to find your content or to get engaged with what you're doing?
Yeah, so if you are interested in watching my sketch comedy about board games, that is called Things Get Dicey. That's not the name of my channel. Is actually my name, Paula Deming, Deming. But if you type in Things Get Dicey into the search in YouTube, you will find it. So that's one way. You can also watch me play board games if you like. I do that on Twitch with the GenCon TV Twitch channel. So that's twitch.tv/GenCon TV. I do that every Wednesday with Matthew Jude from This Game is Broken. We play board games together online using like Tabletopia, Tabletop Simulator. It's a fun time. Or speaking of This Game is Broken, if you like comedy panel shows like Wait, Wait, Don't Tell Me or something, you can listen to a podcast called This Game is Broken that I happen to be on, and it is about board games, but it's a quiz show and we crack a lot of jokes. It's very fun. It's not very informational. But if that sounds like a good time, you should watch that. Look, find me on Twitter. Go to @Paula Deming on Twitter. I have a whole list of I do a bunch of other non-board game related things. I'm not going to talk about them now, but you can find them on my Twitter account.
That sounds good. And I'll put all those links and socials in the description, and also in this video, you'll see them there. Yeah. No, that's good. Yeah. Did I tell you you're actually going to be editing this, right?
Oh, gosh. You're going to regret that choice. I'm just like, jump cut.
Just kidding. But yeah, so Paula, I want to thank you so much for taking the time to be on this show and share a little bit about your life.
Me, and for letting me just kind of, I just kind of rambled a little bit about like advice for you're in the general sense, advice for people's move to LA or their YouTube channels. So thank you for letting me give some unsolicited.
You're welcome. And we're happy to have you come back again, hopefully someday, and maybe catch up and see where you're at then. So thank you for being here. And for those of you anytime. And for those of you who are watching and who have checked out this episode, you can check out more Winter Moon Games content at wintermoongames.com. We're also on pretty much any social media platform of your choice: Facebook, Instagram, Twitter. We're now on TikTok. Strangely enough, I know. and we stream on Twitch occasionally, so check us out on those platforms of your choice. And thank you so much for watching, friends of gaming. And my name is Chris, and I'll see you next time.